have no idea. I didn't coach that one at all.
Oh, nice. You were with jelly beans?
I was with
Okay. Quite as much as the high ones yesterday, but
yeah. That's fine.
Go on, will be sent out after. Okay.
Ooh.
Always take a break. Okay. Is everyone good to go?
Mhm.
Advantage 1 is cost. Healthcare spending is unsustainable. Recent estimates, best studies sure know. NDT health spending will grow at 5.5% through 2026, 1% employment wealth, but GDP growth nonpartisan. Through projections and valuable benchmark projections are predicted that current law current greater injection of new tender weakening commitment to controlling utilization will yield higher spending. Health spending is not a natural phenomenon. Our fate is not sealed. If we let it accelerate healthcare, we'll consume 20% of the economy legitimately considered because our implications for our future taxation are borrowing public. Health spending grows exceeding national income growth when financed by taxes. The tax rate when needs rise to 70% healthcare is a tapeworm for the American economy. We do not need to slow the rate of its growth. While healthcare prices and inflation slow to how crime grows, and healthcare will see general inflation paid to us for care destroys behavior. Represents a transfer from the broad population to the healthcare sector. Our system provides care that offers little or no help. We cannot continue to publicly finance health spending if it grows at 1 percentage point faster than GDP. If we are not in a crisis yet, but we will be. Healthcare costs are locking in slow growth now. Healthcare spending crowds on disposable income while disease reduces productivity. The break is imminent. Spills over to all sectors for our show. And 17, healthcare can be considered a gift and good healthcare. Costs can be discretionary spending, but reduce the ability to earn income. A dollar spent on healthcare translates to more than a dollar not spent somewhere else. The U.S. spends 5 times more than a counterpart. This will increase the baby boomers' demand on more healthcare. If you need more healthcare, you are not able to earn as much. You will curtail your expension in a drastic manner. If an inverse survivorship bias, if you spend now, your chances are you spend even more in the future. result in rent seeking. The recession has reduced resources more towards medicine costs make up a sixth of the economy and will grow to a fifth in 8 years. Expenditure choke out the life of the middle class, helping up more and more of our paychecks. When the next recession comes, healthcare costs will deliver, and slow growth deteriorates the international order and causes extinction. Has in 17, the burden of maintaining the order will fall in the U.S. No other country has the capacity or mindset. No other country will contend with the global economy and will maintain the trading system, combat terrorism or disease, or maintain order in the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. In order to lead the U.S. needs to put its house in order. The U.S. cannot lead if it does not have a strong domestic foundation, and its security requires resources. The better the U.S. is at doing economically, the more it will have to devote to what it needs without igniting, distracting debate. Respect for American model will increase only if it's seen as successful. The most basic test will be growth at the range of 3%, and achieving long-term growth is essential to prevent global conflict and sustain the multilateral order. Alleviates existential threats. Burroughs in 16, the multilateralist system will be priced on a strong U.S. unless healthcare becomes far more efficient, slower growth, accelerate, making it hard to continue trade liberalization efforts. A world that will not have the West as big as the economic powerhouse could division military contest between the U.S. and China with Russia. These contests will pay to a new Cold War. The U.S. need to be guiding the international system. There will be a new vibrant global governance system. New tech carries big risks. Geoengineering, synthetic biology, and nanotech. The world, there's major disruption. There's little alternative to global cooperation. If one does not conflict, dog eat dog. World top economic times has seen the U.S. become distrustful multilateral institutions, and the U.S.-led liberal order is key to solve global conflict. Domestic strength is that foundation is key. Kagan in 17, China and Russia pose the challenge to the people and prospects order created by U.S. If there were to accomplish the agenda, the world would return to competing great powers, causing produce of the two destructive world wars. The absence of any great power and result is an unprecedented global calamity. The American-led system requires them to pursue ambitions cautiously. A system dependent on the will and can peer into the heart of the liberal order. The order's economic core has remained healthy and confident in a myriad of emerging threats. Risk extinction, cognitive bias means you're more likely to underestimate the risk given the unprecedented nature of new evolving tech. Has try or die for maximizing the effectiveness of U.S. power. Brooks and 14 interconnections enables conflict spread quickly beyond borders. From species survival with respect to the world's grown dangerous states possess the ability to destroy the human race. Nuclear materials now less control. Our world has grown more uncertain. We can have no point of comparison for the scale of risk faced today. One cannot dismiss a catastrophic event such as climate or nuclear conflict with low probability. How do we compute the probability of events that never happened? Most analysts assume the Soviet Union was stable until it collapsed. These urgent implications for U.S. strategic planning. The U.S. should use considerable power it has to foster the order. The objective should be a peaceful international order with an effective global governance. We should see this because of the decision role. Accelerating the economy is key to outrun entropy that causes extinction. Shabrovsky in 18 to solve the growth we need to rejuvenate our economy to ensure sustained new products, creativity, and creation are key. Growth is not only possible but essential. Without growth, civilization cannot exist. This dissipative system generates entropy as soon as ceases to create new organizations, depletes resources. There's no way to go back. Always leads only to disintegration and disappearance. The plan solves healthcare costs and leads to lower admin costs, compels private insurers to lower prices to maintain its copays sufficiently to prevent excessive purchases. Walker in 17, this plan is encouraged by the dollar spent on healthcare being redirected by cheaper programs. The existence of better government program will compel private insurance to perform better. Automatic enrollment is limited to citizens and legal residents. Enrolling undocumented people comes with substantial risk. Immigration officials will locate the most existing plan cost sharing structure with limited price. Millions system without copays with increased costs and waste is out of pocket limit. Copays are not major funding source, but simply a way to encourage behavior. The plan redirects our healthcare funding to more efficient systems. The federal government doesn't need to balance its budget. The plan provides sufficient funding to prevent any short-term economic disruption. The plan would dramatically reduce healthcare spending. We have no problem wasting $1 trillion on unplanned war. We have no problem adding minor revenue streams. Everyone pays and everyone benefits. This bill would reduce state expenditures on healthcare, freeing up their budgets. Advantage 2 is medical federalism. Federalizing Medicaid ensures effective state and federal public health coordination and rescue state budgets from indefinite austerity. Immigrant 13 and full nationalization of Medicaid would greatly enhance federalism, hurting Medicaid, release state governments of unmanageable financial burden. Chronic state budget squeeze relentlessly forces cuts in essential state level functions. States cannot be expected to remain austere indefinitely. Medicaid does going to crush state budget when full nationalization could eliminate shedding Medicaid obligations, liberating state governments to pursue their own goals more freely. Transforming a state government bureaucracy requires changing leadership committed to changing many states may not be dedicated to changing their bureaucratic culture because the top officials decide everything about the law. They expect everything to expect recalcitrance. Only full federalization could overcome by transferring ultimate responsibility to federal authority. Absent federalization, state governments will be squeezed in ongoing Medicaid responsibility and perpetual austerity. By relieving state budgets, the Medicaid government would gain flexibility to manage their state central fiscal problem, confronting the states against rapidly rising healthcare costs for states, relieving them of the number one obligation causing their financial distress, to enable them to regain capacity to function. The rationalized Medicaid payment system matching rates should be increased so that the federal government pays for everyone. Today's approach is a drain on the economy, killing state budgets. Federalizing Medicaid would only pay for itself by squeezing out rapid waste. Federalizing Medicaid would by no means be sufficient to repair all of America's healthcare system, but it's an essential next step to reducing dysfunction. If Medicaid were to be federalized, it would create new possibilities for merging with the new public insurance plan available on the exchanges, and the plan's rebalance of Fed-state responsibilities is ideal. Causes effective state governance. Federalizing Medicaid is part of NHI's key aim rate, and 10 financial pressures will balance state budget structure of the key states in a permanent austerity. Education, law enforcement, social service, transit, and other basic connections will continue to be squeezed. Dragged down to economic prosperity. Federalism has been pushed to the breaking point, relying on state state and local governments to innovate, added the burden loading ability to restructure insurance system, less states growing and soaring costs. The result is a vicious cycle of perception. New public sector is incompetent, will continue preventing resources necessary to do their job. The solution to rebalance to the federal state division. By so far, the most important step would be to federalize Medicaid, integrate Medicaid into a universal NHI federal institution to joint economy scale, eliminating growing state budgets, enable coverage to manage their states more effectively. State budget shortfalls and inept coordination cause grid volatility. Stealing 15 state budget shortfalls are permitting basic tasks needed to upgrade the infrastructure. The growing vulnerability of the grid to weather and terrorist threats. Upgrading the grid would allow for better integration curve. Climate change decrease the reliability of electricity in the face of weather. Increase the use of microgrids could help communities keep the lights on. Grid volatility causes nuclear war. Injuries increase in 11. DOT is unable to provide basic electricity in the grid. It's flying. The installation rate 99% of their electricity from civilian grid. Critical missions are entirely dependent on the nation. National grid during blackout military operation be seriously compromised, particularly in the blackout where during combat operation. U.S. and Soviet ensured to understand the debilitating an opponent could escalate to nuclear war. America's opponents might not be deterred. Bill, Fed, and state medical coordination and state financial health are key to build health resilience to nuclear meltdowns, pandemics, NASA, and 12 new resilience to disaster, catastrophic infections, surrounding and robust public health preparedness. Ensuring access to care, prevention, and intervention are important to remedying health inequities, build resilience, and reduce the medical footprint. Disaster resilience help mitigate the medical consequences of disaster. Strong health agencies, state and local health service coordinating backbone of advancing public health preparedness are now in jeopardy due to declines in Fed, state, and local government budgets, cuts in public health workforce pressures on public health by overburdened healthcare community system health networks, foster resilience, healthcare coalition conduct a cohesive, coherent medical response, increase in patients during public health emergency, potential for nuclear accident motivated risk mitigation. The ASK Federalist models key to effective state CDC cooperation over crisis intervention spills over internationally. Coastin and Halogen 17 and CDC intervened to state local approval health insurance responsibility, federal state cooperation on climate effectiveness. States have experienced staff and facilities quarantine CDC really exercise power monitoring emergency powers essential not only for health but also national security law and for official but hard to detect and respond to pathogenic threats or constitutional safeguards. Although protection necessary, so choose the capacity agencies pandemic extinction. Thus, Kelvin and 15 over description and advice creating public health medicine that led to super drugs that immune to treatment that we thrust back in time before we had drugs. We're going to diffuse above we need new antibiotics and major outbreaks and climate events that would lead to catastrophic results and represents a threat to national security. That's the plan. The United States federal government should establish an American National Health Insurance Program. America establishes a subsidized public option that takes on everyone insured by Medicaid and SHIP. That's Matthews 70 America we're creating a new single payer program that take on everyone insured by Medicaid and SHIP. And automatically roll out for they be considered the insurance, the private insurance. America involves cost sharing similar to the private plan. Their deductibles, co-insurance, out-of-pocket spending, and premiums cost sharing would be limited. Employers could buy into. They have 80% of the vast majority of employers are switched to plans. 85% of Americans would feed America. Almost every employer would choose because it's so much cheaper raise the state and income taxes for rich and easily covered. Worth it. Easily covered.
Okay, we're gonna take some breath. Cool. Ready for cross-ex? Okay. You say extend. The plan is to extend Medicare. How does Americare work?
So Americare automatically enrolls newborns and I believe a few other individuals, or those who are enrolled by SHIP, Medicaid, and Medicare currently onto the plan, and then eventually expands to cover the rest of the population.
Okay, so it covers all people. And what does it cover?
It covers the basic essential health services and comprehensive health services.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about the cost advantage. You say administrative costs. How high are administrative costs now?
Our evidence indicates that they take away 1/6 of the economy and they're going to rise to 1/5 of the economy.
Even if they take up 6 of the economy, how can the app address all administrative costs, like necessary things like billing?
We simplify the system by merging Medicare, Medicaid, and SHIP into one program, as well as we encourage private insurers to lower prices and increase competition because it's a subsidized public option on the exchanges.
Sure. How does that solve slow growth?
Our evidence indicates that slow growth is happening because of high administrative costs, because it crowds out all dollars that can be spent on more productive sectors of the economy, such as things like national security, social services, etc.
Okay.
Besides healthcare.
Sure. So which specific social services are being crowded out right now?
Our evidence doesn't get that specific, but it talks about how state budgets are having their own social programs right now, like in areas like education that aren't able to be funded now.
Okay, the Federalism Advantage.
It's also like discretionary spending too.
Okay,
for
sure.
households.
The Federalism Advantage. Explain to me how like the AF fixes kind of cooperative state-federal relations.
So our ANREG evidence is very good on the question that Medicaid is the biggest burden for states right now. It takes up over to a third to a half of their budgets, which allows them to not effectively operate on the programs that they want to, such as things like, integrating the grid, fixing those things, working with CDC cooperation to like have better public health responsiveness, as well as do things like education, etc. The plan by federalizing Medicaid takes that burden away from states and allows them to more flexibly decide what they want to do.
Okay, how does that solve pandemic responses?
So our evidence indicates that the CDC right now cannot effectively cooperate with states because they do not have the infrastructure necessary to respond to pandemics because they don't have the money or infrastructure to, respond to them. Our evidence indicates by getting rid of Medicaid, states.
Why are states
more
better?
effective
It's also
states.
Sure, why are states better at responses than the federal government?
Well, that's not our argument. Our argument is that the CDC and the states need to cooperate effectively, which is why states need new infrastructure and funding to respond to them.
Okay, how is the AF funded?
Our evidence indicates it would be funded through excise taxes and taxes on the highest income abilities. That was the last line. Or states, sorry, not excise.
So it's funded by taxes.
Raises state income tax.
Okay.
For the rich.
Sure.
For the rich, yeah.
Sounds good. So how does the AF affect the private, does the private insurance industry still exist? How does it, how
Yeah,
does
we're
it
a
work?
subsidized public option on the exchanges.
Okay,
We allow we allow employers to buy into America.
Yeah.
okay, cool. Actually, we'll take a little bit more crap. We'll start that.
The order's going to be 8 off the case. Probably will skip the last one.
What was that number?
What was that?
It was 8, probably skipping the last one.
Given that you skipped the last one in both the debates I judged you, and we get 7 sheets out. I guess
I
we do
would
get to
not.
8, I'll
you
just-
have yet to earn that 8th sheet.
I would not put the 8 in, but Rafi was like, keep it in the duck. So
Oh, blaming me for it. I see.
I did say I won't get to this. You want me to keep it in the duck? Your response is yes.
Usually the 2N throws the 1N under the bus. That's a bold move.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, you can throw me into the best round.
I mean, it means I'm optimistic you'll be extra speedy and get through.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm being supportive part. I like it.
Oh, and then case in the order of cost and federalism. Okay. Alright. Is everyone good?
Yes.
Alright. First up is TNA Chinese government must be single payer, only 16 health insurance system back through the system of 4. Basic modes back in rich benchmark national health insurance and out of pocket. And then the NHI has to be the government single payer vote negative limits, but justify independent proposal for modifying the health insurance market that are indistinguishable from the score hours and the most predictable limits that represent the literature ground. Only way to ensure our negative ground, like econ federalism says they're already upon a biased topic in. Next is specify the package determines different outcomes in the quality of introduced competition down. And it says we have promotes competition health performance, we have rest of the question that is practicing on the opinion when you able to divide the issues out and the able to the standardized benefit package makes it easier over the able to consumers have the same preference as Medicare. The problem by the along with the private plans be actually equivalent to the Medicare benefits, but what about the difference between the benefit package and everybody else employers that have benefited of the good CAP and the ruling over the large deductible plans, and as a voting issue for negative preparation and clash specification is key to robust debates about the details of national health insurance gap. Focus the debate about the health insurance is good or bad rather than the core of the talk which is the best design for expanding insurance. And next is midterms. GOP headwinds into the House instead of formalizing course direction health rules in. Trust repeat Republican course direction. We also need to prevent the losing House Senate both giving a strong blow to head of the Republicans that look both ways. We notice when the vote of the Obama for the yellow was unpopular. And then the role of the Senate defeated the Republicans Virginia elected Republican support drops to low 70% of Democrats and because of the general constitution the Democrats will be able to in the Senate and the House. And the GOP will lose with health care terms of hurricane force winning the health cares. Key to Dem vectors, the Apple sex God 322. Healthcare reform would defeat the Republicans in November. The healthcare reform, the backlash that would be able from the now power NATO. They are winning the issue 20 Caribbeans are announced, but they would be able to like the voter like the party that would be able what's right and would be able to provide the more ammunition than before the voters had been able to head to the polls. The healthcare reform has been in power for a little bit of the land. A decisive victory in the healthcare reform debate in dim. Control enabled impeachment, aggressive investigation will uncover the needed evidence. Provoke 1-2 investigations into Trump's administration ensure that the House will subpoena power to be able to let them investigate more aggressively. The GOP is not able to really too deep as the Democrats may be able very much would be the Congress. Let's take on the Trump's businesses and sexual assault scandals, the campaign's connection with Russia. The investigation can be enormously politically impactful. The impeachment proceedings starts in the House would be likely to kick off the chamber control of the president and impeachment would be able to have to go along and unrestrained Trump foreign policy causing multiple scenarios of nuclear war or not. 17 Trump's kind of foreign policy would be able to stand to do this damage to our allies and ultimately after just wanted a leader who defeated the entire world. He would be able to go after catastrophic war with an acid nuclear powered, however, NATO allies sources through Trump who won't be able to have the same conflict with the UK or the US and they would have it already. Then we got fully back to life that the US and Trump would be able to plan a trade war with China and only be able to optionally offer the list China would deal with North Korea. And then Trump's been able to run a relationship with Russia and he has been open allies in an awkward position unable to value when he believes the invitation by actors to just slash him and ignore him brings to distrust nor him and X is new apps. New undisclosed apps are badly crushed. Clash to make the negative research impossible that bad for healthcare education and destroy the apps sales and X is states. The 50 states and all relevant territories of the United States establish and fully fund interstate competition in America, national health insurance program, and eliminate jackpots on the insurance of general obligation debt is so long-term bonds necessary for the use of the proceeds to finance the government shortfalls. The state self-declared federal law on Herbie. 17 states are inserting themselves in the competition more than a dozen already able to federal rate sought to create a true living market structure coming out of California, New York, and about good fellow we received the healthcare market, the kind of advantages, and there is a single healthcare market for everyone, kind of care be able provided to all residents of the federal government of the states. Plans a blueprint for national reform, and next is biotech. App crushes medical innovation, Phillips in 14 medical innovation reduces the price of health and innovation. We will provide the real insurance that the government will be able to come down with real act the demand of the ability discounts to reduce the returns of innovation treatment to be able to Europe and company would be able to have a lower innovator or return to spending the government be able to impact the medical innovation of biotech is key to hegemony, prevents Chinese military superiority malad 15. Biotech would be able to offer the signature of in the US ultimate expression would be able to super powerful of the private insurance we have the biggest hit with the biotech in Iraq and Afghanistan and would be able to build a bit of shelter would be able to leave in the arms races that would be able to incredible for the original more than hegemony. The Chinese aggressive interest in gene therapy and their direct weapons can be able to cause destruction and their nuclear weapon would be able to cease with the biotech would be able to hold the decisive advantage of power power production, creating asymmetrical vulnerabilities of your U.S. conventional technology, and they go down as a nuclear conflict, the overwhelming edge of the U.S. and the military damage, we have no jeopardy back to being harnessed in the middle force, ultimately, that would be able to change the commitments to the atomic weapons, Hiroshima, and CO2, or the far-fetched quantities of battery minutes in the power, and that guarantees misconconia. Actually, skip that card. And next is hospitals. Expanding Medicare would be a disaster for the supply side of the economy. Medicare 17 Medicare has been significantly less than the private insurance. Medicare reimbursement would cover the average cost of the having the patient that won't have the fixed cost. Some people on Medicare are already able to third, but the national health expenses are most likely to use the hospitals and cost as you go somewhere where it's going to end up in the hospital. Profit margins are enough to absorb the large costs, and that triggers massive food price spikes down. Then 16 rural health organizations struggling in enormous cost. The additional items to be able to many business and healthcare are the largest employer that would be able to have business community because it goes to rural America. To feed the country that we ever was grounded in, that would be able to work. Then our promise for us to go through the roof and nuclear war FDI. 12 conflicts in the next century once they get about it, lack of research are pointing to the World War II and the people going into the cities and the state is unstable to wholesale. Bloody wars like the development, increasing incredible standard World War III, self-proclaimed 22 governments, while identifying families are pretty clear war. And do you want me to read? Skip to page?
Yes.
Cost. No hedge impact to hone. $15 naturally will hinge over the confidence high, and I would be able to put in theory of where they're all times and high under unipolarity, the multipolarity, the amount of power to be able to be constrained more powerful eyes. And the chief problem is the element minor power, those with the objection to the beautiful, it's likely to be able to generate the resistance and beautiful, the difficulty, sending the credible signals miscount to be able to lead to war that powers are strong, individuals who were the nuclear weapons in the war would be able to result, or the certainty about the result, think about Australia and Iran and ask, logic is backwards and how it's cost other countries, also can't prove savings given the unique U.S. healthcare prices. Holland 17 moving the states to a national healthcare deal, unprecedented because we spend more on this than any other sector in the other country that ever has. And there's a perception of that we can single care so much less pressure would be up this game would be able to bring out the spending line. This gets to causal relationship wrong. We pay basically twice as much for everything. You could be able to get those costs down, but that's not done magically by saving. And we're switching off single care plan. Explodes the deficit. Roy 16. The single payer would increase federal spending by at least 55%. The Friedman estimates of the plan would be able to require $30.8 trillion. The estimate is leading to the disease. Government healthcare spending is entertainment that takes on the kind of the federal government, even Federalism an optimistic projection Medicare would increase the federal spending by at least $28 trillion. If the plan fails to reduce the growth of spending, it would result in $32 trillion in new federal spending. The promise safe to materialize would increase the federal spending 64%, or more Medicare would increase the 60% payroll tax. The plan would increase the deficit by $19 trillion. Most Medicare would eliminate healthcare. Free spending would go up to $14 trillion. New tax would hammer the economy until its revenue greater deficit. The point is to save money through price control. You don't have to impose that single payer just price control on fear of U.S. default, collapse, financial institution, merit. 12. Suppose some development of the U.S. interest in health would be able to recognize the cost of services and debt to be rise, and every credit rating agency would not be able to at least to recognize the risk in the public finances economy. The vision cycle raising the cost would be able to the government says interest ratio cost increases the risk premium would be able to interest the races by the debt service ratio cost of the private borrowing, which the private borrowing which slows economic activity. Mark the card economic activity.
Skip to Hempstead.
And healthcare spending growth low now. Hempstead 1010 and the healthcare spending growth was growing by only 3.5% in hospitals and growth is by 1.3%. Sending the ATA's prices are growing very low. The utilization increase would be able to prices spending growth and healthcare price growth is after the same as economic inflation growth. Healthcare service price growth was even lower in the hospital. And the visitation prices have been able to climb since 2006 since the coverage expansion downward trend pressure has been able to persist and no next to the federal. Auto enrollment would require condition of federal funding, which is a kind of thing NFIB ruled against Shin and Carpetta 17 make the state participation the condition of federal funding. Under reform, federal funds would be able to be made available only the states would be able to agree to cooperate. The auto enrollment program would be able to include the separate funding on the states and NFIB bans course the federal mandates and plan versus economists. 17, the California blue state plan was the Trump using litigation circumventing healthcare where Democrats in the states might take focus in the blue states where the Trump using around federal policy. The Trumps that ran the federal funding that would be able to court and all the kind of 2012 the Supreme Court ruled the federal government cannot force states to bid with financial guidance had no impact or it's crazy non-unique. Clark 14. The United States ensures more blacks than any other nation. The outage is increased by settling the past decade. The red loss we have accounted 285% more often, costing $150 billion a year in the cost. Would 18 infrastructure investment would be able to go to modernize the work of the gas policy. Would be able local commissioners risk and terrorism would be able to constantly America. They rely on increasing on digital by the demand of the year. Condition of problems getting worse. The storms and extreme events like the storms by the year. Nobody able to outage to increase by the weather increase 130 per year in the grid. The designer falling back to addition and no exchange from the far. 17 natural pandemics are unlikely to cause extinction of the H1N3 recorded extinction of 4% of prescribed disease or which is numerously and globally dispersed to rational response not only to be killed off by pandemic highly lethal. Pathogen kill the person before they able to spread their no pressure pathogen are not able to be lethal in tons of powdered marijuana tort reform sanctuary city gun control levy. 17 levels for the able to recondition the federalism. The Republicans are appealing to the evaded federalist principles. The rule reversal is reflecting the position of such a the drug legalization, hormone sexuality, gun control, the drug war, the removed by the Commerce Clause, the national prohibition in the Congress be able to regulate under the Commerce Clause, nobody able to regulate virtually anything considered a tort reform. Arbitrary tort reform.
Sorry, tort reform?
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Status of the counterclaim?
Additional.
Can you kick individual planks?
No.
Net benefit is just midterms?
Yep. And yeah.
Yes.
And the federalism stuff on piece.
Yeah, the link term to federalism.
Why you force automatic enrollment into state programs, which is what your linked evidence about NFIB conditioning is about.
It's
what
it's not, the
program
state's
is.
counterclaim is linked to it because it's not the federal government forcing states to do it, it's we're fiating the 50 states.
But the card says that states cannot condition automatic enrollment into their never mind, it's fine. T, what is single payer?
So it's a system in which the government publicly insures all, like pays for all healthcare costs for everyone. It's universal and comprehensive.
Cross-section of the ONEC proves that the act is that eventually. Why doesn't that resolve your?
I mean, so it would, like, even if it's eventually, that delay in time is, it would like.
Why
undermine
there's always a
the-
delay in the transition to a large-scale single payer?
Well, no, because a single payer would be a major healthcare reform that's suddenly this new single payer policy rather than something that's
Yes,
just
that's
gradual
my
adoption.
argument.
That's something like public option, then it should be single payer. If you say, like,
That's
public
fine.
option eventually turns into single payer.
Spec, what does it mean to spec a package?
Like what things are going to be covered, like what services.
What plan texts do that?
I mean, it's like saying that what plan to actually do that doesn't answer the question. That
Well, I mean,
maybe
if it's
like
community
bad debate,
consensus that
but like it
does that,
undermines
what
like the
is the
ability to
right
like
line?
actually know how much your plan costs, like to be able to like
Why
determine
don't
if it
solvency
like
advocates check that?
what.
Why don't solvency advocates check that?
Well, like if your solvency advocate says what sort of services are covered and explains like what the program covers, then it's easy to like understand that. But like the solvency advocate just saying like doesn't say the correct
DA,
number.
the Scott link is about the special elections in Pennsylvania where they ask everyone the question, is healthcare important to you? Why is that a good metric for determining whether healthcare is key to the midterm elections?
Because it demonstrates that voters care a lot about healthcare and
But
then
they literally
like,
ask the leading question, do you care about healthcare? Like,
I mean, it's still but I mean, it still
That's
doesn't like
the
it's,
question. That's not leading. It's asking what their opinion
Yeah.
are on it.
okay, fair enough. The prop card, I guess, where do you have a piece of evidence that indicates that the Democrats can win enough seats in both the House and Senate to overcome GOP?
yeah. So our Bolton evidence says that it would swing voters in both houses, or that like they're right now winning in both houses, and that it would swing the election.
I guess, where do you have a piece of evidence that says that they have a sufficient number of votes to get impeachment proceedings through the Senate?
Through this, I mean, like we say that like it's going to flip both the House and the Senate.
I
Our also our
understand that.
pro-op
I'm
evidence
asking,
says
where
that
do you
even
have
if
a
it's
number
just the
correlation?
what?
I'm asking, where do you have a piece of evidence that quantifies the numbers of seats that the Democrats will win in the Senate?
I mean, I don't know if it says, if our Bolton evidence gives exact numbers, but our pro-op evidence says that winning the House would be sufficient as well.
the slow growth advantage, the medical federalism advantage, topicality, spec, new apps, states, midterms, biotech, rural health, Medicare Medicaid.
States, midterms, biotech, world again.
Right. Is anybody not ready?
1 second. Okay.
They can't go for impact defense for 2015 when they haven't answered uniqueness, conceded counterbalancing coming in the status quo. Russia and China are challenging U.S. economic authority. It's a question of whether we have economic strength to counterbalancing it prevents a collapse of multilateral institutions. Yes, there are cost savings. They haven't answered our specific internal links. We solve administrative costs by reducing Medicare rates and establishing better coordination of bargaining power. The Medicare increases bargaining power, which allows us to drive down rates. Co-pays mean that there's no excess purchasing, which is driving high medical rates in the status quo. And the employer shift guarantees that there is high volume health purchasing in the status quo. The deficit DA argument is about Bernie cares, not about the act of playing. You should read that all through the lens of our 1AC solvency deficit. Debt and deficits are priced in, and there's no impact. 17 investors are not remotely aware of the traceability payback 100 trillion marks already priced in the direct deficit. There's at the least U.S. problems. Trump future servicing will be easier. Stacking productivity, boom, stunning wealth creation of the treasury debts will become extremely so long as federal revenues rise. So the ability tomorrow, at least the 40 years, will minus once again actually scratch that argument. It's not unique. Healthcare debt spiral kills the economy now. It drains for more productive sectors, which causes collapse. There's no short-term collapse. Paul and 17, there's been a drumbeat of crash stories. 10 years later, most of them are still bringing financial problems every 4 to 7 years since the beginning of the Republic. Naysayers missed the mark by 1,000 miles. The Fed propped up markets by keeping rates low until the market embraces their crashes. Unlike the market is a fight every call. So sweat actors have no idea when this will occur. Healthcare spending depresses wages for a minute. 16, when costs low, it results in more jobs. The converse is also true. Healthcare cost pass through. If you slow the growth of costs, that helps increase wage and income growth. Health costs a substantial growing part of the budget. That deficit is projected to rise to the degree that you bring down health spending. You can have fiscal sustainability. A lot more work remains to be done. It's key to the overall economy. Dupin 16, Gordon, one of the leading productivity experts, argued that higher wages can boost productivity growth. The main reason for slow growth by giving firms a reason to purchase capital. The slowdown prevents a direct Fed to growth productivity slow regardless of tax policies. Employers have little reason to invest in new capital and raise productivity, and wages are stagnant. Their argument about collapsing financial institutions, there's no warrant for why the plan would be sufficient for that. No reason why the status quo is not unique. So because there's a market collapse in the status quo. Healthcare spending is not high. Healthcare spending is high in the status quo. You can classify all the uniqueness evidence, uniqueness debate I did above. The federalism dissent, the federalism advantage. The auto enrollment argument is about state programs, which links to the counterplan but not the plan, because we're auto enrollment in a federal program. If they ever articulate this argument, we get new answers. The link trend, the states love the plan, and Medicaid spending is decking budgets. Campbell in 17, more than 20% of spent on Medicaid and education alone account for nearly 6% of the budget. Dramatically upward spiral spending increase. This is due to the dramatic Medicaid expansion. 62 million Americans are on Medicaid, and some states 25% of the population is covered. There is no spillover argument. Only we have a specific spillover about Medicaid federalism, but there's no reason that spills over to any terminal impact, and they don't read one anyway. Their impact defense of the blackouts evidence. Blackouts is about domestic blackouts, i.e. people not having power on in their houses. The Anderson Breeds evidence indicate that the DoD grid is connected to the civilian grid, and destruction of the blackouts cause escalation, causes the U.S. to lash out because we don't know what our enemies are doing. Yes, there is a disease impact. Their impact defense assumes effective coordination. Our argument is that states are pissed at the federal government now because of budget cuts that are coming in the status quo. Only the plan, high Medicaid spending, only the plan kind of turns that around and gives states more effective means to manage their budgets. The thumpers don't take out the Medicaid federalism advantage because we have a specific spillover argument, but they don't, which takes out the link turn. Oh, go back to the slow growth page. They've conceded that fast growth is key to avoid economic entropy, which causes destruction of resources, over proliferation of the economy, which causes extinction through things like environmental destruction and escalation of wars. They can't get more impact defense to this. Topicality. We meet because of auto enrollment. Everyone is paid for eventually, which is the interpretation that their evidence discusses. Counter-interpretation, universal healthcare financing, Bodenheimer and the goal of national health insurance, duration, universal healthcare financing. The essence is mode of financing healthcare. National health insurance involves out-of-pocket payments by one or a mixture of the other three financing mode. Funds are collected by government or quasi-governmental fund, which pays hospital, physician, HMOs, and other healthcare providers. It overlimits because there's zero topical absence. Single payer is an imprecise standard. It's not defined in any one single piece of evidence, and different countries have different interpretations of what single payer is. We're not a free market incentives. F, we guarantee that people enroll in government insurance, which means there's no ground loss. There's an F ground DA. It's sacrosanct under this topic, given its unprecedented small size. It's a prerequisite to neg innovation and effective research. If the public option is a key part of the NHI, then it is arbitrary to reject it. Reasonability, the NEC has to prove the topic is educationally useless, and under our interpretation, merely winning theirs is better, encourages a race to the bottom that crowds out substance. Spec. We read a long solvency evidence that specs a taxation mechanism in a package via essential health benefits and basic coverage. Cross-ex checks we'd have clarified this year proves that no one specs but Michigan. They just make the affirmative burden impossible and don't actually increase net ground because people will just spike out of those links anyways. Forcing specification of financing is bad, at least a minor adjustment counterplans that are unpredictable and shift the focus of the debate from the resolution question. Moreover, it allows the app to spike out of links to coordinate position, which turns our offense. Normal means debates are valuable and good in the literature. You should cross-apply the reasonability argument. New apps. New apps are good. They force critical thinking and thinking on your feet within a constrained time limit, which is a real-world applicable scenario. No new apps creates no incentive for research, which turns topic education because we get stale and we exhaust arguments by round. We exhaust all arguments by round one of GSU. It's key to real-world education. No one in real life will disclose to you, which means thinking on your feet is a valuable skill. Debate is a competitive research game. Increasing our chances to win is not sufficient reason to vote negative. Counter-interpretation. We only get to break new apps against teams that are faster than us. You should default to reasonability. We don't have to make debate impossible. States. 50 state fiat is a voting issue. They force us to debate utopian ideals not based on the literature and artificially pay fiat past solvency deficits, making it impossible to be at federal waivers to state action solve their offense. Permutation do both. It shows the link to the net benefit because it's perceived as state leadership. If that's wrong, it proves the counterplan links to the net benefit because Trump takes credit. It can't solve the cost advantage because federal authority over Medicare, Medicaid, or CHIP, which means they can't solve value-based care or escalating costs in the large swaths of the population. They can't solve the Federalism Advantage. Federal funding mandates and Medicaid cost state resentment and impede meaningful state policies. Effective coordination with federal bureaucracy happens after the gift of the plan. States going it alone increases resentment. It means no coordination to either solve meltdowns or CDC coordination or RISA. Dennett in 17 Wales were not permitted states to regulate RISA plans. This is supported by clear provisions. 1332 specifically prohibits departments from waiving a RISA preemption, which is not within their purview, nor does the ACA grants as authority. State employer mandate would be impossible to administer and increase the burden of compliance. There's no federal follow-on and no complex barriers. The United States have to start from scratch, establish new networks, negotiate rates, and enroll benefits. It's hard to see how they can develop an effective competitor. Certainly not as effective as plans linked to Medicare. State options do not seem to be as effective as a national plan. They torpedo the economy. Rodden 11 after states engaged in borrowing and fiscal panic led to sudden reductions in revenue. States were unable to service their debt. Several states repudiated their debts, and the entire federation was cut off from capital markets. State governments want U.S. states are sovereign debtors to approach credit markets against states. BVRs. Creditors want to assess states' revenues because of their rules. They do not smooth over borrowing. State governments have been sensitive to credit ratings. They need to keep debt under control. It's an important part of the political discourse in states. That links to all of our Haas arguments about slow growth and increasing and debt midterms. The link evidence is about single payer stopping GOP healthcare failure. There's no reason the app is that because it's not burning care. The GOP will win out. Even 3-7 early voting numbers suggested to reduce the Democratic Republicans had record-breaking turnout on the Dem side. There was greater internal strike. Democrats should be concerned about their ability to mobilize populace, so the party would find itself facing enthusiasm deficit on the Republican side. There was clear unity. Republican voters who will support whoever is on their ticket motivated to act as a bulwark against any blue wave, raising expectations of what could be dangerous. Constituents are disinclined to vote in midterms. A logical voter could see the plan and still vote for Dems. Gun control thumbs burns 322 thousands of students demand an end to the gun violence. The march is beginning. A moment of political awakening. Millions and millions of people. It's going to look scary to politicians. Students will be eligible to vote and have found to make gun laws a central issue. Many hope to organize and lay groundwork. The gun issue become a focal point for young people who are fed up. I'm going to vote them out of office, and so is my entire generation. Competing impulses define these students as voters. Their uniqueness evidence is a leading question. You should reject it. Mueller thumps Drucker 316 if there's actual evidence. Everyone. Actually, I'm not going to read that card. Russia thumps the election. Prefers studies and data over speculation. Cuts in 219. Facebook, Google, and Twitter are fundamentally vulnerable to disinformation to build up this year's midterm. Far harder than a single troll farm. And next year, new technologies mean disinformation will likely get worse before it gets better. The system makes disinformation indistinguishable from legit ad standard tools that could be exploited by anyone. The troll farm had a budget of only $1.25 million. It was so effective that it was able to sway the election market. At election, Mueller thumps either he exonerates he exonerates Trump, or he gets impeached inevitably as a result of that. Dems won't pursue impeachment. Debinetti and 17 Democratic leaders are trying to rein in the talk of impeachment. Just to do the entire section of traffic backfire in spectacular fashion. Rather than pursuing impeachment, Dems are focusing their energies on persuading colleagues to support the investigation. They have no evidence that says they can get to 60, which is a prerequisite for impeachment. Biotech. The F increases revenues by eliminating cost sharing, burden at all 16, doubling cost sharing, result in 23% of fund use, limited cost sharing, increased adherence, and increased spending without increasing cost. Increases in utilization, apply increased pricing power, and exert upward pressure on prices. Revenues increase as cost sharing falls. Conversely, increased cost sharing reduces utilization, pushes revenues downward. Biotech is shot. Million 17 forces and bios have put the drug industry in perils. A series of self-inflicted resulting from maladaptation, economic cycles, and chronicles these industries from being the darling of investors. The world is standing on the brink of extinction. NIH funding has fallen by 25%. Venture capitalists no longer willing to invest. Pharmaceutical companies shelf R&D, focusing on me-too drugs. Biotech companies are disappearing. Academics R&D capacity overbuilt in response to NIH surge. Now lifestyle. Some of this is already being done, just not broadly enough or quickly enough. Share buybacks. The Morgan and 17 companies spend more on share buybacks than R&D buybacks. Exceed 11% R&D spending. Buybacks inoculate them against shareholders. Might be concerned about lackluster research. The cause of high drug prices, restricted access, and stifle innovation is shareholder value. There's very little drug development reliance on them for corporate first. Less likely the company is to experience growth. Executives who buy back in shares instead of investing or committing corporate suicide. The Medicare dissent. This is an advantage for the act. The act does not expand Medicare. It rolls people into it rolls Medicare participants into America, which changes the reimbursement rates, which is what all of their evidence is in context of the stat. What all of their evidence is in context of, which means it's a link turn. The DA is non-unique. Lovelace and 18 rates of rural hospital closures are the highest in the last few decades. There have been a total of 83 closures in rural areas. Reasons vary, but rural populations are older, sicker, and poor. Other factors include decreased demand for implant services, consolidation, and Medicaid. Expanding public insurance is key. Homes and 15 the number of rural hospital closures, accelerating commercially insured residents more likely to bypass their local hospital. Rural hospitals face a compounded reimbursement challenge. Those who could yield higher reimbursement rates are more likely to go to different hospital insurance marketplace. Medicaid expansion of generally exacerbated coverage disparity. Market coverage disparity.
Let's take some prep.
$6.27.
627? Okay, let me just get that down.
621.
621, okay.
Math's hard.
Oh, I feel that, yeah.
Okay, so what piece of evidence indicates like how much this is good? Like, how do you differentiate how much yours is going to cost for burning care? Like, how quickly are these people going to be enrolled into Medicare in order to like?
For one thing, the plan shift. For one thing, burning care is a massively larger proposal than Americare in context of the kind of changes it makes to the structures as well as like the single instance of government financing. The plan doesn't get rid of private insurance companies; it just creates an incentive for certain individuals to enroll in Medicare.
Does the public reimburse private insurers then?
There is a government-public option that works.
Right, but like over time, the private insurers all disappear and the government option becomes the dominant one.
I don't know why that would be the case.
I thought like everyone's enrolled in, like, is everyone enrolled in birth and eventually they're
Auto-enrollment
all
is not the
part
same
of?
thing as private insurance companies disappear.
Okay, you say, so how does like state CDC funds able to like solve for like diseases in other
It's
countries?
not a funding argument, or at least it's not entirely a funding argument. Again, it's a question of coordination. Our argument is that because of Medicaid, the amounts that states have to spend on Medicaid, and they do not have A, the funding, and B, they're pissed at the federal government because they're perceived as the federal government is not.
Like even though like they
enough.
can like coordinate, like what, like are the states going to get some sort of pact to go into other countries when diseases outbreak?
Well,
or
the
like
CDC conducts international disease response in the status quo. Our argument is that is ineffective without federal coordination.
What does state coordination do to the CDC that makes it more effective in other countries?
That makes it more effective in other.
Our evidence indicates it allows like the CDC to like do experimental runs for disease response in state areas that allow them to.
So we
facilities for implementing quarantines while the CDC.
So we do quarantines and experiment in the states, in like different states, and then suddenly we can go into Africa and like address like some sort of zoonotic disease that arises in Africa.
Africa as the example of disease outbreaks.
I mean, because I'm just talking about like it's where like a large proportion of zoonotics arise.
Yes, I guess that is our argument that state failure to gain state or local cooperation undermines the effectiveness of intervention. The evidence is.
Okay, you say so. How does your form of federalism spill over?
Well, it's not a spillover argument in context of the piece of evidence you read. Our argument is that the federal spillover in context of medical federalism is like we've read specific internal links to both the CDC and the state about federal Medicaid funding being a trade-off of those things.
Okay, and it's just like, so then it's more, so the internal link is just about like things that like the state's going to be able to save money for doing.
I mean, the
things.
Kelly
That's
evidence.
like the only.
The Kelly evidence.
Is the internal linkage to grid anything other than like saving states money?
It's state budget shortfalls. Also, the coordination internal link that we talked about on the CDC is also relevant to that.
Okay, we'll start from.
It's a different piece of evidence.
Also, did you all say conditionality? Okay.
You had 621 when you started.
We used 141. So 140. Okay.
Somebody check.
Wait, no, I'm awful now.
Yeah, it is 140.
140. Okay. Send it out.
20 plus 21.
Yeah, I had 138, so that
Okay.
sounds fine.
Yeah, that sounds good. Cool. It'll be T, the state's counterplan, the cost advantage. Yeah, T, state's counterplan, cost advantage.
One second. Okay.
Everyone good to go? National health insurance requires single payer. The impact is limited, especially the NDT. It's either limited, unpredictable, and new apps, topic evolves daily, and they cause infinite number of apps, Medicare Part D, public option ACA, or single service apps, meaning you need to hold the line against strenuous apps. They don't meet our interpretation because they're not government financed apps, but one AC cross X. They maintain the entire private insurance industry, and allow that here the counter interpretation solves none of our offense. Universality still allows single service apps, or different financing mechanisms like in the cases I gave above, which doesn't solve because they can still have different advantages, which means infinite number of apps. We are precise, and Lou evidence says that. It means government finance, even if very slightly, it still is a floor, not a ceiling that allows sufficient app innovation with different mechanisms, and different advantages. For example, they can be different flavors of econ, job block, or other arguments like that. You should air neg because new apps of the NDT mean that it causes structural side bias, where they can always frontline their arguments from non-sweep no ability to prep no advance, which outweighs also the fact that it's sufficient innovation, and they can add benefit packages alongside the floor of having single payer. Would be sufficient reasonability cause a race to the bottom. I don't know what you consider as reasonable enough, which means you should air heavily neg the state's counterplan. We're not going for it. Reject not the team. It's not a reason to vote against us. It didn't alter their strategy. The econ advantage concede. We're going straight from the advantage concede. The apps said they concede that econ can cause nuclear war. The 1AC says that high healthcare spending ends the world, and the North policy that costs $25 trillion. We'll straight to your first running offense and respond to theirs. Our offensive credit crisis. The 1AC Roy evidence says that the outcomes of Obama's entire stimulus onto an economy with no prospect for long-term growth, which spikes interest rates, starts U.S. debt, increases risk premiums, which outweighs their ton of public spending, overheats the economy, convinces creditors we're not able to pay off our debt, which causes positive feedback loops, which they dump our debt, which is one and monarch evidence. Resiliency solves their slow growth impact, but not ours, because rates are already at sub-zero, which means they can't lower them anymore to check a crisis, which outweighs A's time frame. Our latest perception of the app. Cling 12. Investigative fall upon responsibility crisis. Interest rates also perceive risk. Lost confidence. Can quite sudden devastating confidence state. They get self-fulfilling. Turns high confidence low confidence state. Is inherently rapid and possible to predict. Interest rates use treasury securities are low. Investors see U.S. government debt. Believe fiscal swimmer will change directions on future shores. Long fiscal swimmer continue towards for the greater risk. Investor change their assessment. As long as investors are confident government will not default. Investor confidence only false government. Not for borrowing costs by treasury sovereign debt crisis. A sustainable budget for unexpected events. Under the agreement like the last for all investors. B is magnitude. It's a much bigger link to the economy because deficit spending affects the bedrock of the economy. Blackman 16 global economy appears to be. While the U.S. might be healthy, rest of the world sadly not. Adelaide need for steady leadership. World is drowning in debt. Sector levels much more higher than 2008 Great Recession. Makes it all the more important that the world economy is not hit by reduced shock to cause the world economy to falter. And dollar hegemony outweighs and controls the internal link to hegemony. Coddle in 17 U.S. dollar truth function world economy. U.S. dollar is a fundamental two-fundamental system. Maintaining dollar has the force of American currency 1945 more strategic and military supremacy. The dollar crucial to U.S. hegemony. Assuming flow to Delta the U.S. maintain hegemonic status. The oil trading carried out in currencies other than dollar. Bill of the U.S. 6 size one policy could be severely curtailed. The 2EC palette evidence says that long-term effects outweigh, but it doesn't say that no short-term collapse. The evidence is way too old. Doesn't assume the precarity of the global economy. Everyone is watching the Fed right now because of recent discussions of interest rates, which means that the brink is that if we all of a sudden have a $25 trillion top policy, that would cause massive shocks. And borrowing produces a crisis of confidence now. Jude all 16, much money would be needed to tell solve future promises. Present value is $45 trillion healthcare programs, are nearly 5 times funding than Social Security out of the national debt, federal obligations, with a total obligation nearly $60 trillion and unsustainable, longer-reaching, unprecedented levels of borrowing. There'd be a surely crisis of confidence among U.S. creditors. This Mexican foreign unfunded future liabilities, and polluting public debt far away. Today's shortfalls, the one in Roy evidence they explode the deficit. Independent studies from CBO explicit partisan acts would cost $28 to $35 trillion, even with optimistic growth projections, which would double the budget overnight. They say that they're not Bernie care. But the Walker evidence, the one he sees, is about single payer, which is their only solvency argument, which means you should assume that the same data flag, the relevant difference. The app still covers everything, covers all people, which means it would still lead to people being able to get whatever type of care they want, which is fill the deficit. Absent a good explanation of what the difference is, they shouldn't get to make the distinction. It turns out a single payer, Type 17 public option ultimately eliminated. Private insurance altogether leaves a single payer. Insurance a loss $1 billion. Private insurance will lose huge sums. Government insurance plan can operate a loss indefinitely. We've already seen government private coverage in a similar fashion. 6 methods, real chip, drop private coverage, Medicare, Medicaid. Don't cover the true cost of how the beneficiaries care. Private insurers don't have the negotiating leverage providers. The public option eventually become the only option. The plan massively spikes debt. CFRB 16 standard underestimated cost of plan $1 trillion for your standards plan, costing more than $14 trillion more number revenue estimates, very much higher than what special corporate estimate. A 1 percentage point payroll tax would raise $800 billion more, translate less than 10% of over 10 years. Plan would cost $2.6 to $13 trillion over a decade. These costs have substantial effects on debt. Debt will grow to 8% of GDP. Based on estimates, our shortfall of debts would cause that growth 13 percentage points higher. Debt would rise by 60 percentage points higher. Debt will also reach 100% of GDP. I'll do the unique debate here. The one times that evidence says that cross growth is low now. The ACA is lowering costs by ensuring a shift to fee for value, which has led to hospitals and other spendings being low over time. The one EC evidence doesn't price in these recent effects, and is also projected about 2026 means our short-term arguments obviously away. Because we quantified it. Cost growth flow now Clark 12.6. Growth in healthcare spending from 2016, healthcare spending increased 4% compared to 5% growth January 2015. Driven by slow enrollment growth, due to medical services, Medicare, Medicaid, each spending by big coverage expansion of Obamacare. Spending on drugs reached 1% in 2016 compared to 12% in 2014. Spending growth slowed by 3%. Market evidence at 3%. And the debt to GDP ratio is also stable right now, which answers their arguments about crowd out. Burrs at 319 debt to GDP ratio stabilized declines up. During growth figure is stable at deficit tend to 2% GDP growth by a couple points a year since 2011. Because the position has the worst matters is in the absolute figure confidence board. And sees growth of 3% in 2019. These being strong is more than a decade. Yield tax make U.S. more favorable place to do business. Government could spend pretty aggressively without the fiscal picture out of whack. Now they say bargaining power solves. They haven't explained how it solves cost growth or what it would mean to lower prices or how much lower prices means. There's no new one-year clarification. No bargaining power. WP 718 Obamacare state Republicans are sabotaging it. U.S. government healthcare programs have more than Canada, Australia, France, Britain, the entire healthcare system. Government tighten prices. The government has a lot of leverage. Big reason. It is not clamped down on healthcare spending. It is hard to use a politically single payer face all political barriers to real estate and medical industry players have to get past. Little evidence Americans are willing to retreat completely many options disruption take over. Now the spending internal link. They say administrative costs. One is a cross six worse than this. They haven't explained how much they actually say administrative costs. They say it's 1/6 of the global economy. They don't say how much that they actually reduce things are inevitable. For example, things like billing or having or hiring nurses or other people in the hospital itself. Average costs are small. Holds Deacon 16 for single person history uses that cost US and $3 trillion for healthcare. Only $195 billion of overhead profits private insurance. Even the oversight federal savings government programs have given overhead clear to lower the national cost of healthcare by focusing on administrative costs. It's like going on a diet by cutting out Splenda. Now the 2EC reads affirmative evidence and new evidence about wage growth. But wage growth is high now, so we control uniqueness. Davidson 1-1, record high stock market, continue to make Americans who are wealthier spend more. Due to economy, expect consumer spending increased by 2% in 2018. Consumer spending makes it over the economy. Economists believe for business investments will grow 4% touch higher than 2017. Purchases could sluggish increase in productivity, allowing the economy to go faster and faster. And their payroll taxes, which they said they'd been in cross-ex, kill wage growth. Fame in 16 funding increased payroll tax borne by lower wages, higher person tax rate, bigger incentive to work more. AC's tax also significantly compared to standard plan from the CBS on the tax data. The NBR plan is employed by 11 million workers, while the average tax increase 31% of the factors in state and local taxes. Also, they have no evidence they actually solve wage growth. They just say that it's high right now, which means it's not an offense to them because they have no reason why they actually reject it. They also say that we don't have any sufficient link to the deficit spending arguments, but I think I did a really good job explaining about why the plan would literally double the entire federal budget, which means that it'd be high enough to figure the impact. Now, their final internal link is cost savings. So I'll answer that here. They don't solve the one and Z Holland evidence was phenomenal in this question. International evidence, not versus causal. We can't just reverse the entire healthcare sector. If they're right that we're spending a lot of money in the status quo, people wouldn't just give up that medical care. They'd request more care over time. And studies confirm moral hazard turns can over 9/3 randomized control trial gold standard. Outside evidence proof medicine needs to compare enthusiastic single payer. Result in 30% wasted spending, more than 30% wasted for worse and sounds annual difference in spending. Was 2,180% cost differential. Represented waste, which also means that the private insurance industry, they maintain, would just hollow out the plan and request for money, ask for money, see cross exit. They don't get rid of it. Regulatory capture with Medicare Part E is empirically confirmed. Potter 12. Medicare for uncovered tax, for example, regulatory capture doctors likely unpaid billions of dollars, max revenues and profits, some figured out as game the system behind trial advantage. CMS has to have a captured agency, results in a decision made to take into CMS effectively too many of the pay call decisions to aim despite obvious conflict of interest in review for the declaration of data, shows more coding standards have been subject to widespread reviews and manipulation governed interference price controls of the IT industry. It drives up prices 10%. Shannon Dixie, 18, had your solid input from community that vice president industry, increased measure affiliation, once standard deviation, increased price by 10%, different pathway of regulatory capture, more affiliated proposals improves less than information measured as lower quality data. It's a bank without security guards, absent 70 Medicare, expensive definition of healthcare need to lead to to pursue unwise treatment, Medicare's mandate, private insurance, ignore to things. It's a yes to everything. Mark the Epstein and Kaiser evidence at everything.
Alright, you good?
Yep.
The first piece of evidence I want to talk about, I think, is the piece of Clark evidence.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, rather the piece of Sally Pipe's evidence says, so a lot of the 2NC is, a lot of the pieces of evidence you read are Bernie Care links. The 2NC definitely makes the argument that the plan's auto-enrollment and like coverage would be the same as Bernie Care, but this piece of evidence says 60% of those who are enrolled in CHIP drop private coverage. If that's true, why do any of your Bernie Care links apply? Because
So a
only
couple
60%
things.
of children,
First of all, the 1AC solvency evidence.
don't use
Sure.
coverage.
The 1AC solvency evidence is in the context of single payer. What does that mean? Yeah, correct. The title of the Walker evidence is single payer and something else. So the point is, even if you just call them different things, they're functionally equivalent because the
But your evidence concludes they're not functionally equivalent. What is the distinction between what Sally Pipes is saying about CHIP and what the plan?
No, so Pipe's argument is that the plan inevitably turns, even if you're right, there's a distinction, it turns into single payer because it would crowd out the existing private insurance options. Having a plan with the imprimatur of the
To about
the government.
60% of the degree as your link evidence articulates it as for the Pipes.
Well, no, it's saying that eventually it would be the only option that would be available because the plan would be able to be run
The piece of King
by the
evidence,
government.
the perception link period is from 2012 and says that interest rates are bottomed out in the status quo. This is from the depths of the recession. How does it
If anything, it's more true now because
interest
interest rates are still incredibly low. People
just
have
raised
the main
them a
macro.
few weeks, like a few days ago.
Well, they've raised them like a couple base points, which is not. It doesn't mean they have enough room to lower
It's
them.
a perception link.
So the argument is the plan would literally double the entire federal budget. Also, the 2AC did not make a Thumper's argument, so the 1A doesn't get to make that.
I don't know about that. But
You-
that's fine.
you objectively
The piece
did not.
of WPEB evidence, the bargaining power internal link, is about Obamacare. Why is that?
So you're
defense
correct that it
to
gives the
Obamacare?
example of Obamacare, but it makes a structural claim that the government would not be able to negotiate effectively because
They
the
don't
political-
have enough risk. They don't have the risk tools that are necessary.
No, it's a question about the political system. They're obviously beholden to the industry. Do you really think that Republicans who are getting a ton of money from the insurance industry are going to pressure to lower prices when it comes at the expense of their own self-interest?
Okay,
Obviously
so it's just
not.
an argument that Republicans will mess with it. The
It also says that a bargaining
piece
power
of
works.
Davidson
ACA
evidence,
resolved.
the warrant for why wage growth is high now is the record high stock market. It's from January 1st of this year. How does it assume recent?
That's not correct. It gives the example of the stock market, but it also talks about consumer spending being high, and
because the record high stock market should continue to make Americans feel wealthier.
Well, no, the second part of the card talks
No,
about
that's-
consumer spending descriptively being high right now.
Because there is more money coming from the stock market, how does this assume the recent collapse?
Well, the stock market didn't collapse enough to affect consumer
So
spending.
that
It was a
makes
minor
sense.
drop, and
That's fine.
it'd be
Yes.
that way.
Why do we trade off with dollar hedge?
Sure. So the Cottle evidence says that the plan would lead to people dumping, like other countries dumping U.S. currency because they no longer view it as reliable if we were to double our debt, which would mean that we wouldn't be able to afford things like a strong military.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
determinants. Oh, cool. If there's any other stuff going on. I don't. I was pretty locked into wake prep. So. Yeah, for reading AW. Sweet. I don't think that would ever happen.
Can we get an order?
Yeah, we're just going to be midterms, then innovation, then hospitals, then the Federalism Advantage.
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, we're going to be midterms, then innovation, then hospitals, then the second advantage.
Sorry, 1 second.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
First on federal, on midterms, extendological policymaker, you could do both also gun control and a mule or something. That means there's no chance of a link turn because it'll automatically determine the election. Now, onto innovation, extend that by the share buybacks means there's no chance of innovation. It means the app doesn't do anything to, isn't able to solve it. Now on to hospitals. Hospitals are key to solve. Oh, hospitals are key to solve for food, insecurity, but they're on the brink now. Only the app pushes them over by undermining any sort of hospitals. That means that they leave rural areas, which kills our ag sector, which is key to prevent food wars. There, no impact means it's try or die for the negative. Means if there's any chance that we win the straight turn, then you vote negative. Also, it turns both of their advantages. It turns a hegemony by undermining any sort of checks that it would have on conflicts by creating resource wars, and also it turns disease by undermining any sort of cooperation on disease effectiveness and prevents us from worrying about the grid. Now to the limelight. First, the hospitals. Yes, it does link. They just say that it doesn't expand hospital, it doesn't expand Medicare, but they do enroll people into it. Our 1NC link evidence is that enrolling that Medicare has low profit margins, which means that enrolling it would have more people using Medicare, which is bad for hospitals. There's no warrants for why this difference actually doesn't cause a link, and increasing Medicare enrollment is especially bad. Shankston 16, the public option charge the fire, the hospitals are going to create the public option, the Medicare like payments would be able to address the insurance payment, and the 2/3 of receipt by the Medicare reimbursement below the cost actually providing care, and the would be able to roll it, would be able to health care, would be able to reimburse the Medicare rates, would likely be able to threaten the access to needed health care services, and I'll skip that card. And yes, the uniqueness are their evidence is just brain for us. Rural hospitals are teeming on the edge now. We only need to win a tiny link for the plan to push them over. Rural hospitals are hanging on now with just barely Alexander. 18 hospitals have been able to struggle. The rural hospitals and urban profits have been auctioning off their real estate to investors. Hospitals and walk the backline hospitals they need to be able to margin so they can be able to allow the cash back facilities, increase the wages and more. It's healthy 1/3 have been able to margin less than 2% to be able to remain or losing the performance, will be able to remain modest. And rural hospitals are doing everything they can to stay afloat now with Wiggle Room Bryant. 1031 hospitals are finding Lexington 10, the regional medical center in a negative 2.8% margin at the 2013 turn against in the 8% margin. The hospitals at the breaking point and out, be able to focus on the preventative care in the small hospital, be able to prevent the hospital illness, the benefit financially and external financial pressure, be able to uncertainty about the federal rural hospital will continue to be stressed. Also, their link turn evidence doesn't actually substantiate the link turn, doesn't provide any reason why they're able to solve for hospitals, so there's no chance of it. Now onto the grid, or onto the federal advantage. First on grid, they didn't answer the non-unique portion of our piece of evidence. 285% more grid attacks are happening now, causing $150 billion worth of expenses. It also demonstrates that the impact of empirically united. That's our Clark evidence, and there's no scenario for an impact. They say that the DoD says it's an existential, but their evidence is that if the grid were to be down during a military conflict, they wouldn't be able to have, it would undermine military security, but there's no scenario for someone actually attacking us. And tons of all causes and empirics prove the impact. Plumber 14 problems with the power of the grid cost $150 billion a year, and the large black is going to be getting more common between 2005 and 2009 to be able to raise by 349 per ton. A reason our party busy transition line real problem the power of London, the truly massive black will be able to opportunity with a tree or storm wildlife, knocked out the power line division to be able to trigger the 2003 northeastern attack of 50 million people without the power of the large black is help the equipment, the operator, and the operator in errors and the intentionally small scale attacks could be able to lead to the cost to coach a blackout cyber attacks could be able to deny large regions access for months. Power grids are extremely complex power lines being overloaded by the generators. When they're loaded, you can get a cascading failures, and through the hot weather threatens to be able to break the electricity consumption records. Powers grids are getting old. Mark the card at old. And zero impact Clark. 2003 is the worst case scenario for the MSG fragility, not real in the context of robustness of the grid of the U.S. cyber command and attacks are likely to be able because of the huge amounts of resiliency in the system, or compared system. And no, there's no impact disease. Less than 4% were lethal enough, and lethality traits offer transmissibility, sense of the disease that kills its host can't spread it, and humans can also globally disperse, which means they would be able to survive as their far core evidence. We respond to an attack, but making it free for everyone. The drug's free for everyone. Peterson 14, and it is likely to be able to attack in the U.S. Be able to set up emerging distribution centers for all. Would be able to receive the antibiotics without regard for insurance, and as outlined in the CDC responsibility program, we have a model for universal coverage, and there's no explanation in cross-sects of how they're able to be able to solve. They don't do anything. There's no explanation of how states would be able to cooperate in other countries. They just say they would allow for some sort of experimentation, but they don't describe how that would be actually used in places like Africa. The African diseases would emerge. By the time they reach the U.S., it would already be too late to be able to stop it just with U.S. response initiatives. Also, there's no explanation of how the state funding they describe would be able to solve it. And obviously, it's better for the federal government to be able to tell the states what to do. Otherwise, states will do whatever they want. And cooperative federalism arrangements guarantee a failure in disaster prevention and response. More zone, the 7 emergency challenge the federalism emergency would not abide by the distinction of the Constitution required given between the national and what is local. When the emergency transcends the pre-existing structural divisions, the hospitals were be able to clear who is supposed to respond. Federalism can easily be able to reduce the failure of the government, and that would be able to responsibilities dispersed, and that would be able overall to easily prove inadequate. Mark the card inadequate. And also, the thumpers do apply that demonstrate the inability to cooperate because there's too many issues that the states disagree about. Also, it demonstrates that red states won't want to fund things like the CDC because they want to keep their budgets in line. And if they're Vegas, and also cooperative federalism is bad. Fisher 17 of laws necessary reductions that attend to be able to particular disputes, the law will be able to designate the particular witness in the adjudication will be able to have clear expectations for behavior.
Where did you mark that? Behavior.
While I'm sending this out, is everyone good for an order?
Sure.
The medical federalism advantage. T. The hospitals DA. The cost advantage.
Okay.
Or actually, sorry, the midterm, or the innovation DA, the cost advantage.
Farms, farming,
From the top, please.
Medical federalism.
Yeah,
T. Hospitals. Innovation DA.
got it.
Cost advantage. And the card should be sent. but I-
Okay. I haven't gotten it
I
yet.
have a delay.
Oh, okay. I just got it. So you said federalism, T, innovation, hospitals, cost?
Hospitals innovation cost.
Oh, okay.
Alright, is everyone good to go? Their great impact defenses are uniqueness arguments. Yes, attacks are increasing now. Our evidence indicates they're going to increase the sophistication. It's a question of whether or not we can decouple the DoD grid from the civilian grid to be able to solve. Our evidence indicates only state budgets are able to solve this. They mark their evidence that says the grids are getting old right now, which proves there is no resilience right now. Our evidence indicates that only increasing microgrids is able to solve it and prevent things like retaliation. Our just brief evidence indicates it's a question of when people launch cyber attacks, whether or not Trump will respond in an aggressive fashion, which our evidence indicates only the plan's able to solve. Yes, there's an impact disease. Our evidence indicates a new antibiotic resistance is increasing right now, which makes it more deadly, even increasing their risk of transmittability. Our Gallup evidence is much better than our question. Our evidence indicates only effective coordination and decreasing the amount of prescription drugs used is able to solve, which is our argument about decreasing excessive cost of extinction, because our evidence indicates that there's no responsive coordination right now. Yes, we see how cooperation. Our evidence indicates that experimentation allow us to understand how to necessarily quarantine effectively and necessarily solve, which the CDC can use in places like Africa to be able to solve our African diseases. There is no uniqueness that they're increasing now, which means we have a time period to be able to solve. Our evidence indicates it's able to solve their cooperative federalism fields. Arguments is our uniqueness argument. There is resentment by the states right now because the budget cuts and ineffective ability to pay for Medicaid. Yet the federal government is asking them to take on more responsibility. The plan's able to solve that relationship by taking Medicaid away, allowing that gives them more flexibility. It's able to solve their numbers don't take out our internally, even if states disagree on certain issues, and they question whether or not they have the budget to focus on the issues they care about, which is their uniqueness argument about why red states wouldn't pay for our arguments, which is our Medicaid federalism argument. The topicality flow, you should view this through the lens of reasonability. There is no specific coverage of any of the 2AC offensive defenses of our interpretation of the topic. We should be highly skeptical of any 2AR, 2NR on this argument. Our argument is that financing is the main question of national health insurance, which means if we cover everyone and we specify the financing mechanism, that's the only way to get in-depth debate over national health insurance. Otherwise, they just make the topic single payer only, which one doesn't have a definite designation of what single payer means in the first place, which means the plan could reasonably be viewed as single payer because we cover everyone too. Their interpretation is utopian because there's no way that you can cover everyone because certain immigrants don't get coverage, etc. And tax evasion means it's no, there's an arbitrariness to that because they arbitrarily limit out some discussion of national health insurance just because they don't like the financing mechanism. Where our argument is not necessarily increasing the topic from 1 out to 6 as is much uniquely better because of us for active innovation and negative innovation be able to solve the counterparts of the free market are able to solve because our counter interpretation doesn't allow for free market counter questions because it's a question of government and financing and coverage of the entire population, which they consider is better for all the Afghans. Their new apps argument, new apps bad argument was answered on the other floor. The answer of offense is real world because we know we will dispose in the real life and we get new apps against teams who are faster than us. The hospitals decided it doesn't kill agriculture. There's no internal link by rural hospitals necessarily away all food productions. Individuals like Monsanto necessarily outweigh doesn't turn hegemony. It's the opposite. We are a cap on escalation in different areas like resource wars where they would break out to solve doesn't turn disease because it's a question of cooperation and CDC, which are relying on food prices able to solve our their link argument is just simply wrong. Our Walker argument is very good that America is a new program that does not use Medicare rates, but rather it folds in Medicare release into the Medicare program. The rates are much lower and necessarily better for hospitals because it means that they can charge higher prices to be able to solve their bottom line, which is our link chart argument. It also increases the demand side of it because small players don't give in their employees in coverage right now, which the plan would require them to do because it lowers the cost, which means they're more likely to buy into this not unique anyway because hospitals are decreasing right now. Things like consolidation needs necessarily means they are way because of the rural hospitals can't compete. There's also just no demand and there's higher premiums, which means people aren't going to hospitals because they can't sell their bottom line. The innovation is that the buybacks argument proves they have no uniqueness for any of their econ arguments about innovation, which is their internal credibility and investor confidence because there's no venture capitalism right now because stock markets are low, which internally turns all of their confidence arguments. The cost arguments, they have no uniqueness or no counterplan to solve this advantage, which means you have to be 100% sure the economy is fine right now to vote for any of their offense. The top level arguments, their Roy evidence is about Bernie Care, which is necessarily different because Bernie Care does not have copays, and it has higher amounts of benefits that we give. The plan is not that it requires copays and lower and generous benefits, which means that we necessarily cost massively less than the plan. Our Walker is much better on this question. It takes out the real feelings. Their pipes evidence is not in the context of that. It's not about our public option, which our evidence is much.
Pipes evidence is 60% of people enroll, which means we're only
60% of people only enroll, so which means only 60% of the cost at best, which means they have no uniqueness cares necessarily from their credibility arguments because they're already deflating the dollar right now and kill the things that Lockman evidence should be rejected because he's been writing about overheating for 3 years and nothing's fucking happened, which means it's able to solve banking to Sterling Kruger and 16 agents of strength the regulatory capital increase the capital requirement, the stresses increase the banking system, significantly more resilient, loss absorbing quality of the capital is greatly improved prudential reform, affected credibility, bring profitability, market liquidity, disrupting financial activity, we're a long way from overheating, bursting, excluding, we told the economies are overheating, core inflation was up 0.3%, over inflation was 2.1%, not in signals, or overheating labor growth, forces definitely some signs that are approaching full employment, labor markets providing opportunities to be therefore left behind, market left behind, if they're right about uniqueness about dollars in Europe is at all costs are broad, and 17 U.S. currency has been a steady decline, the dollar index is down 80%, the weakness of stability in Europe outpacing U.S. given the officials get confidence to complement pulling back stimulus, which will solve their next argument is that you are single payer, I insert that above, we're a single payer equivalent, which is what our argument says, the uniqueness of it, the ACA is collapsing, there's no shift for fee for service, or additional shift for fee for service right now, our evidence is much better and newer than kids will solve, there's over prescription right now, and Medicaid ship rates are too high to be able to decrease it, the debt to DUP rate is show being stable right now, seems so uniqueness for any of their charges stable solve, yes, bargaining power evidence indicates that we give the government the power necessary to lower private competition rates and able to solve it, which are all of it above the admin costs we solve because we get rid of the complex systems able to solve, not going for the wage internally, which means they have no uniqueness, which proves there's no consumer spending, which internally ensures all of their confidence arguments, the cost saving arguments were all explained above because we restrict the over-aggressive giving of care, which means stable solve low taxes are key to the economy, and we're not payroll taxes, that's across the 1 stone, and 17 high tax on Google robust growth, compare the push tax with the Clinton tax increases after the cuts expired, the economy continued to grow, the comprehensive review Gale San Market concluded the growth rates in the U.S. about change in tandem with changes in our taxes in Kansas and large tax growth, black to careful economic research find the tax on substantially boost work, saving or investment.
Sounds like a good.
Oh, sorry?
Yeah.
I'm missing a key.
Oh, oh, thank you.
Kansas Harvard round last minute. Yeah. What did Harvard get on?
This is good.
Oh, okay, solid. Just based on that application, it's like, against definitely.
Right, like that's how Harvard gets you.
That's true.
Yeah.
Cool. It'll be the hospitals disad, the biotech disad, T, cost advantage, federalism advantage. Okay, let me know whenever it is good to go. We're not going for hospitals conceded it doesn't turn the case not key to ag, which means our straight turn on the econ advantage obviously it weighs none of the arguments are impacted out as per the 1AR, which means if it doesn't turn the app, it doesn't actually matter. Biotech, the buybacks argument is not our scenario. It's not a question of markets being stable. It's not a question of market stability. Rather, it's a question of plan costing too much money and destabilizing international regimes. Also, the drop in the stock market was obviously temporary. We need to have evidence in this that proves that it was a large enough drop in the stock market to alter consumer confidence. That was explained to NC Cross 6T. We're not going perfect and said the we need argument proves the link on the single pair turns on case with the 2EC explanation. This was that they cover everyone and everything, which means the plan is a lot bigger than they think it is now. The cost advantage. Even if I don't win the international federal confidence arguments, you can vote negative straight turn through because I'm completely positive the 1AR conceded our regulatory capture arguments, which is a link turn on the app. But I'll start at the top. The raw evidence proves the plan costs a ton of money. It would cost $25-35 trillion even with opposite risk projections, which is still the entire budget deficit. Think about this: the app will cover every single person for every single thing. The 1AR explanation is just splitting hairs. They say it's the lower benefits and different coverage, but the 2EC, the 1EC cross the app was comprehensive, and the walk evidence is about single payer, which means you should filter plan solvency. Throughout the plan solvency to lend to their solvency advocate who explains the plan would cover all those people, which means the app would cost less money. The CFRB evidence answered their taxes, they answered the taxes, because it says the taxes would fall short of covering it. We would have to deficit spend and spend a ton of money to ensure we could actually afford the plan. But the Pipes evidence proves that even if there is a distinction, it turns into single payer because it would crowd out other existing insurance options. A plan with the infrastructure of the government plus being able to subsidize indefinitely would drive out other companies. They say it's only about 60%. That's still a large number of plans, but also that's Pipes estimate the initial number of plans, which would affect it later on. They say now I'll do the deficit spending impact debate at the very top. The plan collapses global stability. We're already spending a ton of money on debt. Countries are watching us. It's the equivalent of a swimmer going towards a waterfall. If they think we can't pay for debt, and obviously, well, the start dumping debt. Countries like China that hold large numbers of T-bonds will dump those bonds because they can't assume that they don't assume they'll have them. The Kling evidence and Lackland evidence are phenomenally specific in this question. They think default's a realistic possibility now, and we'll start dumping bonds. We spend too much money, and the plan literally doubles the entire federal budget. All of our impact necessary implicates the ability to go over the Federalism Advantage because they conceded it's a larger time frame and magnitude than under their arguments because they will dump them instantly, which also turns their ability to solve for things like pandemics. Things that requires international cooperation, as per the 1AR explanation of quarantining with the cooperation of other countries. If we have to have massive costing like the CDC because we're undergoing a recession that obviously we can't solve for things like disease or the grid. They say that European countries are an all cause with this Umbara evidence, but again, it's a question of dumping U.S. Treasury bonds, which is the specificity. I implore you to read the Lackman evidence and Kling evidence because they're very specific. They say that the evidence is too old. These were predicted for a long time. That wasn't implicated in the 1AR. If we want to treat the first scenario that right now we're on the brink because of debt escalating, then it means that dumping all these bonds would be obviously problematic. The Greenberg evidence of the banking system is linked, which is also not our internal link. It's not about domestic class, rather it's a question of other countries dumping U.S. Treasury bonds. I'll do the uniqueness thing here because the 1AR was very light and concession around this portion of it. The Clark evidence and Hempstead evidence, the 1NC and 2NC are very specific that healthcare cost growth is stabilizing right now from hospital prices to the price of drugs, which means the AC has shifted to a fee for value. They say the AC is collapsing. They had to include a piece of evidence in this. But it shows that descriptively prices are going down over time, and then we're able to solve them. Plus, they can see that our debt to GDP ratio, the evidence below that the debt to GDP ratio is currently stabilized, which means we're able to afford it. But the regulatory capture arguments are where you're voting negative because the 1AR straight conceded it. The plan is hollowed out by the private insurance industry. Remember, they don't by the private insurance industry, which was the Potter evidence and the Dixon evidence below that. They dropped prices 10% because obviously Republicans in Congress who roll into the industry will do whatever they want. The plan includes the private insurance industry, which means prices would go way up, which also turns their admin cost arguments because prices rise. They've also conceded admin costs for a small link, which was the 1NC Holt, the 2NC Holt Egan evidence. That it's like it's equivalent to going on a diet by cutting S fund. It's only $195 billion, which means that even if they flips their actually uniqueness because it means that they make prices much worse. Which means we have offense here and And the tax thing I answered about because CFRB says taxes wouldn't come enough to cover it. Now, the Federalism Advantage. I think I've done a lot of the impact calculus advantage about why it turns out, but remember, there's a risk of impact even to federalism, and we all agree that, economic decline goes nuclear, there's no impact to grid, they consider uniqueness arguments out there, attacks are 285% more likely the status quo, which empirically disprove their impact because they haven't escalated or caused any action. They've also conceded the one argument, there's no specific scenario of who would attack the US or when, the government collapse, or why the grid is important in this one particular context. The preliminary evidence says that the grid is resilient right now and is able to avoid it. No impact to disease, transmissibility trades off lethality. If a disease is able to spread really quickly, we can't be able to respond to it. It would burn out, it would instantly burn out because otherwise it would kill it, so it's spreading too quickly. Which means that it kills everyone before they're able to spread. Far cites empirical evidence in diseases to prove this, which is why Zika and Ebola all died out, but they don't solve the impact. No explanation across how they're able to solve it. Disease through coordination. They did not identify exactly what state quarantines experimentation do to make quarantining more effective in other countries. The federal government can't just do quarantining in the status quo. I'm going for the reason why there are too many comforts to federalism. Things like Jeff Sessions altering sanctuary cities and marijuana all make cooperative federalism impossible. They say uniqueness to them because it proves resentment, but they can't overcome all of that built-in resentment. States are going to be like, oh shucks, now that we have healthcare, we're going to forget about all these other things that are altering cooperative federalism, which means they can't solve any rest of the impact.
Like, the Missouri evidence on disease that, like...
Oh yeah, the
Missouri
Missouri evidence means they can't solve for pandemics. It undermines cooperation, cooperative federalism. I mean, no state knows who should be able to solve it. You shouldn't trust Rick Perry and Scott Walker to coordinate among themselves who's going to solve pandemics. Obviously, Republican governors wouldn't know what's up. We should instead let the federal government selectively commandeer states that caught diseases because it allows for coordinated responses, which means that they can't solve pandemics or the grid.
Okay, the slow growth advantage, the rural hospitals DA, the federalism advantage. Actually, cost advantage, topicality, rural farms, federalism, rural hospitals.
Costs, T, rural federalism.
Is everyone good?
No counterplan that solves the cost advantage and no impact defense to the economy means a small risk of that the affirmative wins. The uniqueness argument justifies an affirmative ballot. It frames the direction of the entirety of the link debate, which I don't think our argument was one of your argument that I don't think the 2NR responds to. We explicitly the 2NR extends the argument that the jet to GDP ratio is stable in the status quo, which means it's fucking structurally impossible for them to win this argument because there's no risk of bond dumping in the status quo if it is stable right now. But we are a death spiral uniqueness argument, increasing healthcare costs drive to destroy the economy and the status quo. There are several warrants. One is the complex billing structure, inflation, and rampant waste that comes as a result of massive private insurance and inflation causes waste and inflation in the economy. It redirects towards more towards sectors of the economy that are unproductive. The second internal link is price. The second internal link, or our evidence quantifies the inflation and administrative cost arguments, and the one you see is a massive up to 10% or 12% of U.S. total economic revenue in the status quo. The second one is price gouging. Private insurers are able to overcharge for rates in the status quo, which forces things like high volume health purchasing and overconsumption of medical products, which drives up waste and inefficiency in the system. The piece of pipes evidence that they try to expend is a crowd out argument. We have explicitly said that this piece of evidence only says that 60% of people will drop their private insurance companies, which at least mitigates the risk of a crowd out argument, because still 40% of people keep their private insurance companies, but it's still sufficient to solve the high volume health purchasing and price gouging evidence that they are talking about. The deficit spending argument, we fiat taxes, which means there's no impact to it, and there's no, the 1AC piece of evidence is in context of things like payroll taxes. They conceded the 1AR piece of stone evidence that says there's no negative taxing impact, there's no negative impact on the economy from taxes, which means that is sufficient to solve, and there's no articulation of how much deficit spending has to. Anyway, if we win our uniqueness arguments, it proves that the app would not cost very much because it massively reduces the funding that, or massively reduces the cost of healthcare overall. The pipes evidence is a piece of impact defense. They did not answer the 1AR. They did not answer, or the regulatory capture argument. Look, all of this evidence is in context of Medicare saying yes to everything. That is a line from the card. Our 1AC piece of Walker evidence indicates that that's the reason why price gouge, that is high volume health purchasing. The Walker evidence is an explicit impact, or is an explicit reason why the affirmative solves that, because we reduce reimbursements. We are comprehensive coverage, which is not this. We are comprehensive coverage and essential health benefits, which is not the same as high volume health purchasing, because that is for external and unnecessary medical procedures. They did not answer the 1AR piece of Bernstein evidence, which indicates that there's no risk of this bond dumping argument. It's more recent than any of their pieces. It's more recent than any of their pieces of evidence. First of all of their pieces of evidence is from the most recent piece of evidence they extend on this argument is from 2016. The older pieces of evidence are from 2012. Do not assume massive changes in the economy that have happened as a result of them. So you should prefer our new uniqueness arguments, raising interest rates in the past, the stock market collapsing, and all of the other arguments about all of kind of different fluctuations that happen in the economy, and the U.S.'s ability to repay back its debt means that their evidence cannot assume the status quo, or Europe thumps the debt, or Europe thumps the dollar hedge argument, because strong growth in Europe, if they're right about the uniqueness argument, takes out the ability of the U.S. to activate dollar hedge. The U.S. to activate dollar hedge.
Because they're already dumping them.
Yeah, because they're already dumping bonds in the status quo. The Grunberg evidence says that the banking sector is resilient. Agencies have strengthened regulatory capital and increased capital requirements, which means there's no risk of a terminal impact. Of bond dumping, because if we've read recent evidence that says the banking sector is resilient in the status quo, then they can kind of give more money into the money market that allows things like investment, in international arenas. As well as just general expression economy. The prices rises, administrative cost argument, the Walker evidence, as we saw that. Topicality, auto enrollment is not the same thing as a single payer system, just because people are. It is a single payer equivalent, that is what the evidence is in context of. You can read the Walker evidence after the debate. Just because people are auto enrolled in the system doesn't mean they have to accept or use the insurance coverage of the system. The hospital stuff, they conceded the coverage internal link, which is at least a tiebreaker on this internal link, because coverage is key to rural hospitals. They've read evidence that says rural hospitals are key to the economy and overall U.S. power projection. The only argument in the 2NR was that this doesn't turn the app, but the 2AC read a specific coverage internal link. Federalism. The only piece of impact defense on the grid advantage is a argument that says that there's tons of grid attacks coming in the status quo. Yes, this is our argument that it's necessary for there to be federal state coordination. That it's necessary for us to recalibrate federal state coordination in order to effectively respond to those grid attacks. This piece of impact defense answers the second argument in the 2NR that says there's no specific scenario for escalation. Obviously, if there are thousands of cyber attacks coming in the status quo, they've conceded that states are fundamentally unable to effectuate changes to the grid in the status quo or protect it because of the lack of coordination. They are pissed because Medicare rates are straining their budgets, and meaning that they are viewing the causing lack of cooperation with the federal government, which means that they cannot effectively cooperate to do grid modernization. The resiliency argument has no warrant, which means the resiliency argument has no warrant, and the thousands of attacks in the status quo disprove it. The Anderson-Breitz evidence says that it's intimately connected to the civilian grid, which means blackouts in the civilian grid cause U.S. lashout, which should at least be a tiebreaker if we win any risk of the unique state. Not going for this. Debate. Debate.
Do y'all want a card, Doc?
Yes, please.
Congratulations to both teams. It's a 3-0 for the affirmative. I'll start. I think that the status quo is very likely to collapse the economy, even though I think there is some risk of the app expanding that in a way that's harmful to growth. It's kind of a try or die, and they have an external impact. I think the Eurozone defense severely mitigates any external scenario to the dollar outside of the global economy, which means that the grid is kind of the important tiebreaker. I'll start on the case. I think that the app is doing a very impressive job of co-opting a lot of your defense and indicating that all of your stuff about the oldness of this infrastructure and the increasing rate of attacks is just a reason why they need to increase state-federal coordination and state efforts to improve the grid. And just the app has a much more explained and fleshed out scenario for escalation and a very quick and bullet A2NR. I think solvency for this is severely mitigated because, like, you don't answer some of the bottom things on federalism, like Sessions, or that Trumpies are incompetent. But I think the reason why there's still some is that you've always explained a budget internal link, and I don't see the connection between all of these federalism or Trump incompetence and the state budgets argument. I think the 2NR could have gotten around this by establishing a threshold claim that since they have two internal links, coordination and budgets, that if they do not solve one of those, then they are insufficient to solve the advantage, but that level of analysis doesn't happen. So I err towards the app who has advanced this coherent story. On the economy, I think that the econ is definitely more important than the grid because the 2NR has conceded that the decline would turn investment in the grid, and the 2NR is definitely the best, actually, the only final level that compares impacts. However, there's just like this structural, or I'll start with the dollar hedge stuff. I just don't have a warrant for answering the Eurozone need. You say, I implore you to read this Ev. I just don't understand the warrant in that Ev based on your speech. And I think they're explaining the Eurozone stuff more. I think you have two internal links to the economy then. The first is debt. This is difficult to vote on because I think that economic collapse is inevitable due to administrative costs and health costs internally. The app has some defense to yours, which is certainly much more than you have to their internal link. It's kind of death by 1,000 cuts. There's this 60% arc, which even if that's a lot, it's certainly less than your evidence describes. The app decreases the cost of care, so it would cost much less. A lot of the money is from taxes. I don't give the 2NR a full weight of this we fiat only taxes pivot because I did not think that that was present earlier in the debate. However, I think a substantial chunk of the app's money certainly does come from taxes, and the 2NR doesn't really invest in the taxation link to the economy quite as much as earlier in the debate, which is pretty significant mitigation. There's the regulatory capture cost turn, which I was not in it with the start of the 2NR because I did think the 1AR didn't have an on-point answer to this argument. But upon reading this Ev, I think the 1AR's global frame of we are different than Medicare just really lined up a lot with, like, it just perfectly characterized your evidence, and I thought it was much more accurate than it had seemed initially. I also didn't quite see the connection between regulatory capture and an increase in costs after the 2NR, and I think the app's internal links are much more fleshed out. I also just think since the 2NR is very light on the warrants as to why costs are declining right now, this can at most be solvency defense, and there's just this structural fire argument.
I think I generally agree with all of that. I think you need to have I guess I never really understood why marijuana and other federalism fights undercut the AF. I think you do need to advance more of it, right? I mean, they keep saying no, it doesn't. And I have the 2AR making arguments about coordination and being mad about Medicaid costs being a significant factor in the ability for them to cooperate, and I just don't feel like you have done the work to explain why an unrelated issue that doesn't seem to rise to the level of significance as the app's internal link is sufficient to undercut the advantage. And so I thought, I agree. There have been lots of potential scenarios in which somebody could have attacked us. That doesn't mean there won't be a future one in which they do. And so I don't know that I'm unwilling to say that the scenario is entirely empirically false. And so I think it does function to a certain degree as a tiebreaker. I do think the AF gets a lot of, on the economy debate, I think the AF gets a long way, in my opinion, on the framing in the 1AR about the uniqueness debate. I think they ultimately win. I feel the negatives evidence is descriptive of there being like a slight slowing in the amount of healthcare growth, I think, or healthcare spending growth. I think you need to do a little bit more work to explain why that is predictive of future growth. I really only have the 2NR extending the cards and not much warrant to them. I think the affirmative cards could also be better described because I think your evidence is more prescriptive. You do say it's more recent. But other things you could be pointing to is that it does say there are other variables that are coming in the future that could affect costs, like tech expansions or things like that that could change the cost, which would be a pretty good indite of theirs, which is backward-looking evidence as opposed to yours, which is more forward-looking. So I would advise a little more emphasis on that. But part of the problem is neither team really does a fantastic job, other than Michigan saying more recent, of kind of fleshing out these things. So I'm left to my own devices, and I decide that I think the affirmative is winning the direction of the uniqueness. Second, one thing I thought that was a little bit problematic, so I think healthcare spending is structurally increasing, so I think the economy, which is going to be sufficient to trigger the AF internal link, structurally the economy is going to end up in trouble. However, I think there are a couple of places where their evidence and even your evidence read on the global economy uniqueness question as opposed to the healthcare spending uniqueness question. I think the AF is doing a better job of debating this GDP debt card. I'm not sure why that card helps you.
Super AF card.
It's the last line of it says we could spend like drunken sailors as long as we're okay. Now it does assume taxes are low, so if you point out, if you make that argument that it assumes that taxes are low, doesn't assume the AF would increase taxes in some respect, then maybe we could. Maybe there would be an argument, but otherwise the way they're spinning it is that this overwhelms the, like that we basically can be fiscally unrestrained in the short term because there's enough of the GDP debt ratio has moderated and made us more resilient in that regard. And then I also think, I just think the link is a lot smaller than you think it is. I don't think they're full-blown single payer. I think they reduce benefits. I think you need to apply your regulatory capture arguments to their argument, which is all over the floor. I mean, Caitlin does not go there in the 1AR and say regulatory capture, here are my arguments, but all over the place they have been advancing an argument that they decrease Medicare costs because they offer less benefits, stop higher volume services, etc. You need to explain that your regulatory capture arguments are reasons why they don't actually solve for those things. But I don't really feel like the 2NR, other than to extend regulatory capture, and also the bottom of the 2NC on this was not super explanatory, it was just reading the cards. I think you need to do the work to apply those to the argument that no, yeah, you're assuming Medicare somehow magically changes because of the fiat of your plan, but the reality is that Medicare ends up making decisions based on stakeholders that do mean that it's captured, but I don't feel like that work was done. And then I do think the taxes argument mitigates the link somewhat too. And then, so ultimately the combination of the uniqueness issues and the link arguments and the global economic resiliency stuff means that, maybe there's a small link. I don't know that it collapses the economy. I am sure there's a longer term structural link. I do think they solve some costs. And as a result, that was sufficient for me to decide that that was not offense for you and that the other advantage was sufficient as a tiebreaker.
Can I just ask a quick question for you? Was my volume better?
Yes. Yes.
I don't disagree with anything any of the other two judges said, so rather than kind of reiterate that stuff, I'll just kind of go through some suggestions that I had for how you can kind of conceptualize this debate a little bit better. So a disad like an economy argument against a new AF is a little bit difficult if they have any degree of special sauce with what the AF does with regard to financing benefits, etc. And I think that when you're kind of taking that prep after the 1AC and you're kind of just thinking about what you want your basic approach to be, you should have a little bit of a higher threshold for I'm not sure when the decision was made that you were gonna mostly push on the economy, but that should have been a difficult call to make given the propensity for AF weirdness and explanation later. I thought that, so one thing that you really needed in this debate that I think could have made everything just so much easier for you is just the rate setting counterplan. You know, like the AF says they solve costs because they reduce reimbursement rates. Well, why don't we just fiat reducing reimbursement rates and they federalize a bunch of spending that's not now federal, so there can only be net less federal spending under counterplan, and you've solved their warrant for why they solve costs. Like, I think that I've never understood the AF's solvency deficit to the rate setting counterplan, because it's just like literally just fiating to the middleman of the AF and using the bargaining leverage that they say that they provide. So I don't know, like, I didn't hear the 2AC to that obviously, so I can't say how it would have been, but I would have been, if I were negating this AF, I would have been confident in that argument. Also just like, you know, after the 2AC, there's economy weirdness or whatever. Midterms 2AC was just kind of vanilla. I don't know, like if there was a debate that you could strap in on, I would assume it would be that one. I think the 2AC alleged straight turn to the hospitals DA is nothing of the sort. They're like, we reduce rates. And you should be like, yeah, that's the point. Like, Medicare rates are low. You lower them even more. That is really bad for rural healthcare. I have no idea what you all were saying with that. Maybe I missed something, but like, what I floated was advantage for the AF, it rolls Medicare into Americare, changes rates. That's what their M is in the context of. Yeah, it changes rates in the wrong direction, yikes. So I would have, like, you could have pressed on that a lot too, I think.
I have a quick question about that actually. Do you think, so my main reason I stayed away from midterms was I was concerned that I didn't think that states solved the federalism advantage because of some of the stuff about, like, you know, federalizing it being key. Do you think there's a conceivable way that the state's counterplan could solve that advantage?
I mean, like, you know, maybe it's to the extent that it's about budget stuff, you just like have the state's deficit spend, I guess. Like, you know, they have ours that like that's bad for the economy. I just think that like midterms in the case might have been better than econ in the case.
That's fair, yeah.
And so yeah, that's most of the stuff that I had to say to the neg. For the AF, I think you all kind of like, you know, undersold and underutilized some of the differences and nuances in the AF. Like, you should be talking much earlier about, like, I kind of read through your AF to understand this stuff a little bit. It's not exactly the basis for the decision, although I did, mainly I voted AF because I thought the AF was doing a much better job of kind of characterizing the plan as not the single payer you're looking for, kind of just like what the other judges said. You all should be saying, you know, you've read a crowd out link, but no private insurance industry just said, so who cares? And people buy the option, but they pay a premium. You have EV in the 1AC that says that it has premiums. Premiums are money to the government for the healthcare. And, you know, you like it's funded by premiums and taxes, and just like this deficit stuff could be so much more easily dispensed with. The 2AR, I thought, underutilized that debt to GDP ratio card. The strongest utilization I thought of that was, this says that if growth happens, deficits can increase. They have conceded the AF causes fast growth. So if we solve our economy internally, we also solve theirs. Like, you could have said that, I would have been like, check, done. You know, that's the kind of more aggressive way to utilize that card. And I just like, I felt like you all had some pressure points that you could push on that you just kind of weren't pushing as hard as you could.
Okay. I have a question, I guess, for all three judges. Is there a winning 2&R, or do you think that the block just not having a good enough econ link kind of means that we can't really win the link turn?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was kind of just decided by some factual things about what the AF did versus that link came about.
Okay, that's fair, yeah.
I mean, I do think if you, like I said before, I think if you apply the regulatory capture arguments more instead of just extending them and explain why that means they don't end up controlling any costs, and then, you know, they're mitigating your link that only 60% versus 40%, but that's still like the link. So I would still make it, I mean, part of it is if you had not, this, in my opinion, this GDP card still probably gets you in a lot of trouble. But I think if you can try to prove to me that there's an itchy trigger finger for economic collapse and that they don't actually save any money or reduce costs with their Medicare stuff, then I think you could theoretically win the economy, direction of the economy your way.
I strongly agree with Adrian on just like use the reg capture stuff.
Yeah.
I think you should preempt just like the your is actually not out there thing and just make a big push on just judge instruction. Like one or no explicit answer, even if you think they're technically right, or rank capture or subverts the way that you think their stuff would actually be implemented, because that's the entire point of regulatory capture, is that it goes in a different way. I think to solve the like health cost uniqueness issue, I don't know if your FPAX is up, because I didn't scrutinize this very heavily, but if you have evidence that US dollar hedge kind of sustains the global system and resolves other shocks, you would say they can win 100% of the cost thing, but dollar hedge is a status quo counter plan. That means that never escalates to the level of a global crisis. Even if they win large risk of solvency of this, does not matter. So only a risk of the debt stuff does. And then just a bit more time on grid business.
Okay, so that would kind of short circuit their ability to use their uniqueness arguments to take out the debt
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, and there's certainly a 2AR to be had there, but that's where I would have pivoted. I've seen y'all deploy this sort of strategy twice now, where it's like 2 cards on the debt to the 1NC and then next to the integrity of the 2NC.
I don't love it.
No, it's
Develop it in the 1NC more.
Okay, yeah.
because the reason why is like, sure, you throw off the 2AC and it looks like you were vastly ahead from a card standpoint after the block, but literally no judge in their right mind is going to deny the 1AR as many new answers as they
Yeah,
did.
that's fair.
I actually thought Michigan should have been more terroristic about this.
Oh, yeah.
If you wanted to like just read debt good or something, just a brand new impact turn, like, I'm so down. They write a new impact, like this is the entire 2NC, it's a fundamentally different argument. That wouldn't be a strategic argument, this debate, but just to demonstrate how much terrorism they could get away with there. And it also stops you from really condensing in the 2NR. Your 2NR reads very much like 2NC. And I think like a good 2NC, you're developing the right distinctions, but it's just, there isn't debate resolution. It's just argument resolution. And you can't close the door on the 2AR unless there is that sort of judge instruction, I think.
That makes sense. In line with that, if the 1NC did develop it further and the 2NC, would the 2NC then probably take a position other than just straight turning econ, like maybe extend a disad briefly as well or something, and the other case
Or
might-
a counter plan that dealt with part of the case where we had depth, right, exactly.
Yeah, okay, makes sense.
What I needed to hear from you all on regulatory capture was, it's not in the plan, so it's a question of likely effect. They've read evidence that describes a proposal normatively, and we have, like, and I wanted one better card that less factually described what happens in Medicare and more kind of just like contemplated the ongoing political incentive for regulatory capture. Like I wanted to read a card that I could imaginatively apply to the AF, and I just did not think that I had that in front of me, so I didn't give you as much regulatory capture as you wanted.
That makes sense, yeah.
Also, going back to State's question from earlier, why don't you just have planks in your counter plan that force all the states to amend their constitutions to guarantee that they fund these things? So it's like, sure, yeah, like whatever, they'll cut entitlements or education or something they haven't read an impact to. Like fiat will just require them to do it.
That makes sense.
Require them to fund it and stuff.
Yes. It's like, I think that always makes sense against this stuff.
Like make it mandatory rather than.
Like,
Or
can
it's
repeal
like-
ballots like
yeah,
amendments
yeah,
and
yeah.
require.
Or why do they have to do that? Like, they just do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, they just want to.
The people will go there, or worse, they're not paid. We fiat it.
Fair enough.
And fiat means you can just like hold people at gunpoint and be like, the boss kicks the bill. So it avoids the PDA stuff. Like, just fiat is a powerful tool. Read it said to them the way are.
Can't go for your foot in that because states. Just get out.
Yeah, and like I'm pretty sure the AF's repealing BBAs causes the econ crisis card is like about the 1800s or some shit. Pretty sure. Pretty sure.
Also, on that, like, why don't you all use the state budget stuff more to interact with their debt turn in the account? If
Yeah.
all the states are about to go bankrupt, that would definitely indicate the US is not creditworthy, and it would probably force a federal bailout,
Yeah.
which causes their stuff, and they just drop that into a white stem and have gone for a 10 advantage. Like, that's why this half is strategic against that argument.
Yeah.
Right.
That
And
makes
that's
sense.
just kind of like a trend, like I was saying, like that's another example of underutilizing your pressure.
Yeah.
points that you have. Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah, thank you for judging. Good luck.
Good luck.